Hey, y'all, I'm Bud Elliott, and this is my college football summer school series on Cover 3. I bring on the team experts from the 24/7 sports staff and ask them the questions I care about. No fluff. Which players will be toughest to replace? What position groups are sneakily better or worse than I realize? We get you the scoop on each team in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hey, guys, welcome back into Cover 3. I'm Bud Elliott. This is my summer school series. You know what time it is. Time to talk about Pitt. We're going to go to Panther 247. We're going to bring on Ed O'Brien. Ed, welcome into Cover 3.
Hey, thanks for having me, bud. I appreciate you welcoming me on here. Ready to talk some Pitt football.
Absolutely. So another nice year for Pitt under Pat Narduzzi. They lose Jordan Addison, yet they still perform on the field. Defense was pretty nasty once again. Offense generally held up their end of the bargain. What was it like to cover this team last year?
It was exciting. I think they turned out better than I thought they would. Um, I think from an offensive standpoint, it was definitely, I want to say, a little bit of a downgrade, but not too much because of the rushing running game. And to that end, it was nice to see Pitt get back to what they're known for, especially from an offensive standpoint. Punishing defenses with the running game and just having that rushing attack going.
Absolutely. So this year, the offense they lose Keaton Slovis, but they bring in Phil Dragovic. What have you seen so far out of Dragovic? Like, how did he look in spring, and how is he evolving along with the offense?
I thought, during the spring game, they can only, they're only so much from an offensive standpoint. But I thought he did a relatively good job moving the offense when he had opportunities. Limited snaps along with Kristen Vayu, the transfer from Penn State. So I think going into this, I think going into this season, I think he's done enough to warrant being the starting quarterback. But I do think that Kristen Vayu, if things don't go well with Jerkovic first, couple games, he wouldn't be a bad person to back him up or put in replace him. But as to answer your question, I think he's the starter right now, and just going off his experience, having started at Boston College, I think that that'll give Pitt a better chance at winning a couple of those early games, starting the season.
So I think what Signetti, the offensive coordinator, came over as well with Dracovic from Boston College. How will you see the Pitt offense look different this year than it looked last year?
I think you'll still see the same running attack, especially Ronnie Hammond. If Hammond hadn't gotten hurt, in the first couple of games, he might have been in the same position as Izzy Abanikanda ended up in towards the end of the season because he was looking that good. I think you'll see more from the passing game, especially with the quarterbacks going downfield. We didn't see that a lot with Keaton Slovis last year. I think that was something that was missing from last year's passing game that you saw of Kenny Pickett the year before. So I think the offense should improve, from that standpoint, just going downfield more and keeping defenses honest.
Absolutely. On the outside, so that they lose Jared Wayne, who was a very nice receiver for him last year. They do have a lot of guys back. Who would you project to take up or take that spot from Wayne and carry that torch? And is there anybody from the lower ranks who you think could challenge a Mumfield or really burst through the lineup?
I believe Bub Means might be that guy that gets a lot of targets this upcoming season because I think he's the mini receiver coming back that I think that's a true threat downfield. And during the spring game, he received a lot of targets from both quarterbacks. And I think he has that extra gear. He'll be able to get open more, I think, than the other receivers. So I think he'll emerge as the main target. Even though Mumpfield is coming back as well, and he had more receiving yards and catches than Means, but I think Bud Means is the one that'll eventually stand out.
Ed, they do lose four of their top seven on the offensive line. I know they had some offensive line injuries last year. Can you help me sort this room out? Who would you expect to kind of be the starting five if you have an idea at this juncture? And how good do you think this group will be?
Well, what I will say is that I do know Jake Cradle, Blake Zubovic, and Matt Gonkov's Caves will be probably most likely the starters along the offensive line. and then you'll have a mix of redshirt freshmen and some sophomores uh, battling for those other positions. So, but those are the three main linemen that I know. I think for sure are locks for starting positions.
Gotcha. Do you think this group will be better than last year's group, or can it be anywhere close?
I think it could be somewhere close, mainly because those three veterans that are coming um, back to the offensive line this year. So I think it'll be close. It
Gotcha.
shouldn't be too much of a. I don't think it'll be too much of a drop off, especially in the running game.
Last year still had a top 40 defense, power rated if you kind of adjust for opponent and all that stuff. But they lose 4 of their top 5 defensive linemen at least by snap count. That's a fairly big deal, I feel like. What's the level of concern there in Pittsburgh about replacing those guys? Obviously, Coach Partridge does a great job, typically replacing those dudes. I know he comes down here by me in Florida and always signs a bunch of guys. Is there any way this group can avoid a big drop-off?
I'll say this from the outside looking in, it does give reason for concern because there is a lot of talent that graduated or went to the NFL or a couple of guys that transferred. But I think the belief here in Pittsburgh is that you just reload, and they've done a good job, I think, of recruiting depth at the defensive line position. And actually, there was an article that I read. Maybe actually there was a podcast I think defensive lineman coach was on talking about how he recruits. So to answer your question, there's some guys that I think that'll step up, including defensive end Deion Hayes. He was a highly recruited in-state guy from Pennsylvania that Pitt recruited. I think he'll be solid on the edge. And then they have 2 defensive tackles, um, Devin Danielson and David Green. Limited snaps, but they do have some experience. And then, as you mentioned, the rest of the guys that you'll hear about, Ben Brima, Samuel Okunlola, Tyler Bentley, and Sean Fitzsimmons, I'm sorry. Those are younger guys that'll be getting a lot of snaps. And, it's a lot, it definitely is a lot of inexperience, but, Pitt has that history of development defensive linemen. And I just believe that, it may not be as good. The line may not be as good as the line has been, let's say, the past 2 to 3 years, or even probably longer than that. But I do think they'll be better than they'll be better than average. I put it like that. So I think they'll still be good based on the coaching, and it'll be hard to live up to the past defensive lines. But I think if this defensive line can get in and gel, um, along with the coaching, I think they'll have a chance to be not as good, but they should be better than average. I'll say that much.
So they also developed deep or linebackers pretty well, and Servassier Dennis now off to the NFL. That's going to be a hard guy to replace. Is there a front runner to take his spot? Because they return a whole lot of guys there at linebacker other than Dennis.
I would say that the key guy to take his, I guess, not replace him, but be that guy will probably be Shane Salmon. He was a Notre Dame transfer, I believe. Played for Pitt for the first, it's for last year, of course. I think that was his first year over from Notre Dame. So I think he would be that main guy. And then they have a couple other guys that's coming back, Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara, who also received a lot of snaps for Pitt's defense at the linebacker position. So, but I'm going to say Shane Salmon. He's probably that guy. I would put at that. I would say not to replace, but be that guy for Pitt.
Okay, I think we can pretty much assume that they're good at corner. They do have 2 safeties they got to replace though in Hill and Hallett. That seems like that would be tough. What's the level of confidence there?
I think they're pretty confident, especially with getting the transfer from Florida, Donovan McMillan, and having Javon McIntyre. He's a returning defensive back. You know, McIntyre got a lot of snaps last season. Of course, he wasn't a starter, but with McMillan coming in, they're hoping that. I'm sorry, not even hoping. They're counting on them to, along with I say Philip O'Brien. He's another defensive back to kind of lighten the blow of missing Hallett and. Well, I'm sorry, his name escapes me at the moment, but it's replacing those 2 safeties from last year. Brandon Hill, I'm sorry. So it might be a little drop off, but not much of a drop off. That's what I'm hoping. I'm sure that's what the Pitt coaches are hoping for as well.
For sure. So, Ed, let me ask you this: where would you say is the biggest drop off between starters and reserves? Like, what position they just really can't afford to have the backups play too much because those guys just aren't ready yet?
It's a great question. I'm going to say I would say it's along either the offensive or defensive line. It's a lot of inexperience there, so I'm going to say defensive line
Okay.
because I think it's more inexperience on that side of the line. So if you have a couple of those reserves go down, then now you just have a lot of inexperience, freshmen and sophomores playing along that line. So I think defensive line is where they can't afford any injuries.
Pretty manageable, I guess we could say. Non-conference schedule to start. Wofford, Cincinnati, at West Virginia, which I think by this point our summer school listeners will already have heard they lost an awful lot. They do draw Virginia Tech. They get Syracuse, Boston College as well in the within the conference, but they do have to play Notre Dame, Florida State, North Carolina, Louisville, which may be pretty good. Is getting back to a bowl a success for Pat Narduzzi this year?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is due to that schedule, especially there's a rough stretch there of West Virginia, Florida State, North Carolina, Notre Dame, and Louisville. I think 7-5. I'm thinking. I mean, you didn't ask me. I'm thinking 7-5.
Yeah.
That's pretty. I think that's a pretty good. That would be, well, they might not agree, but I think that would be a decent to good season for Pitt, based on the schedule and based on, they lost a lot of key guys from the last couple of years, and so I think 7-5 would be a good season for Pitt, based on what they have coming back and based on a pretty hard schedule, which I believe was called the third hardest schedule in the I would say ACC or the nation. So I'm thinking the ACC. So it's a pretty hard schedule.
Nice. Ed O'Brien, Panther 247. Really appreciate the time, man.